I used to think I knew the man I married. After 10 years together, I believed there were no more secrets between us. But then, in one random moment, a single phone call changed everything. Behind the kind demeanor and the touching story of a deceased uncle was a secret so deeply buried that I couldn't help but wonder how much of my married life was even real. And the worst part was, I had loved and protected that secret for years without knowing it. Looking back on the early days of our marriage, I remember the first time he told me about his late uncle. It was a lightly rainy evening. We were drinking tea in the living room when he began talking about a man who had guided him through the toughest time of his youth back home. His voice lowered, his eyes clouded with sorrow, as if gazing into a distant past. He said that his uncle and the uncle's wife had died in a car accident, leaving behind a little girl with no one to care for her. I was moved. His story made me feel grateful for having a complete family, and at the same time, my heart ached for the orphaned girl. He said she was still living back in his hometown with no other relatives. He wished deeply to bring her to the US to care for her as a way of honoring his late uncle, a gesture that was both noble and humane. Without hesitation, I agreed. How could I refuse when the man I loved so deeply was trying to do the right thing for his lost loved one? We began saving. We weren't wealthy, but I felt it was a cause worth every sacrifice. I was involved in every step of the process: paperwork, visa applications, arranging her schooling and living situation. When she arrived at the airport, I hugged her like a real aunt. She called me auntie, called him uncle, and the three of us lived like a family. Over the years, I treated her with all the kindness and love I had. I took her shopping, cooked for her, worried when she was sick. I began to see her as my own daughter, not legally, but in my heart. Every time I saw her smile, I felt like I had done something good in this world. I never doubted a thing. He never slipped up. Everything aligned with the story he had told from the beginning. Nothing made me suspect that behind all that kindness and grief was a carefully constructed facade hiding something far greater. Something I now wish I had seen earlier. Now that the truth has come out, I can't help but revisit the past and wonder, were his eyes really sad about losing his uncle? Or was he simply afraid the lie wouldn't hold? Everything started to unravel on what seemed like an ordinary day. I was sick with a high fever, lying exhausted on the couch. The girl, whom I still struggle to call by any other name, hurriedly threw on a coat and said she would run out to buy me medicine. Her gesture warmed my heart. Despite feeling miserable, I was thankful for her care. No one could have guessed that in that moment, when I was too weak to even get off the couch, my life would take a drastic turn. She had left her phone on the table. It started ringing. Then again, and again. I hesitated. Could it be important? A friend? School? Thinking it might be urgent, I picked it up. A woman's voice burst through the line, urgent and angry. "Where is my daughter? I need to see her. I can't stand being kept away like this." I froze, assuming she had the wrong number. But then she said my husband's name. Her words were a cold blade. "Tell him, the father of my daughter, that if he doesn't let me see her, I will go to the police." I was stunned. Every word she said hit like a hammer. I tried to stay calm, to ask for clarity, but she hung up before I could say anything more, leaving me with a chaotic swirl of thoughts and a heart shaking with fear, confusion, and anger. When the girl came home with the medicine in hand, I could no longer hide the change in my eyes. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. Not as a niece or a daughter, but as someone holding the key to a terrible lie. "Who is your father?" I asked, in an oddly calm voice. She froze. For a moment, she seemed to want to avoid the question. Then, after what felt like a century of silence, she sighed and whispered, "Your husband." That answer, it wasn't a punch. It was a slow, deep, cold incision. I barely heard anything after that. Every memory, every dinner, every holiday gift I prepared for her like a mother suddenly became distorted. All those years, I had been living with my husband's child, and he had made me believe she was his niece. A lie so meticulously crafted that had I not picked up that call, I might have lived in that illusion for the rest of my life. After she confessed, the room seemed to freeze. I stared at the face I knew so well, The face that had cried when she failed her first test in America, that had held my hand at the hospital, that giggled at my silly dinner stories. And now, that same face was bowed, eyes glistening, as if she too was lost in the labyrinth of a decade-long deception. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Betrayal? Pity? She had only been a child when she came here, a child pulled into a story I should have known from the beginning. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. Why? Why didn't you tell me all these years? She whispered, choked up. I was scared. Dad, he said I shouldn't tell. He said if you knew, you wouldn't accept me, that you'd leave. I didn't want that. You were kind to me. You were the only one who ever loved me like that. I can't describe what I felt hearing those words. Part of me melted, for despite the lie, she truly saw me as her mother. But another part of me froze solid. Because that love had been used as a shield to cover up the truth. A love I had built on trust turned out to be founded on falsehood. That night, I sat in the living room, the dim light casting shadows over memories flashing through my mind. Every birthday gift, every time I comforted her, every moment I proudly called her my husband's niece in front of friends, now felt like puppet strings pulled by trust and kindness. I waited for him to come home. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I asked only one question. Was she really your cousin? He stood frozen, then slowly sat down, avoiding my eyes like they could burn him. He shook his head. No, not my cousin. She's my daughter. Just 3 words, but they thundered like a storm in a clear sky. He confessed. He knew it was over. But what shattered me completely was what he said next. I was afraid of losing you. I knew if you knew, you wouldn't stay. And maybe he was right. But at least I would have had the choice. Instead, he chose for me, with a lie that spanned a decade. After the confession, he spoke as if the lie had never truly been wrong, as if it was a necessary choice. He said he never meant to deceive me, that it all began with good intentions, that he only wanted to be near his daughter, to care for her, to fulfill his duty as a father, one he was denied in the past. I listened, not because I forgave him, but because I needed to understand how someone could live with such a lie for so long. He said that when we first met, he had planned to tell me, but he got scared. Scared I'd judge him. Scared I'd think he was still tied to his past. Scared I'd walk away. You wanted a fresh start without baggage, he said, eyes red. I didn't want to lose my chance to be with you, so I hid it. I looked at the man I had trusted, loved, and built a life with. Every word from him now only made him feel more like a stranger. Yes, he feared losing me, but did he ever fear hurting me when the truth came out? Did he ever consider that I had invested my whole heart into a family I never truly chose? The betrayal wasn't in the child. She was innocent. It was in him, who took away my right to know, to choose, to decide my own life. He let me live as an aunt, a mother, with all my genuine love, without ever telling me the truth. I remember whispering one last question. Would you have ever told me? If that call never came, when? He didn't answer. That silence said it all. He never planned to tell me. He had grown comfortable inside the shell of his own deception. Maybe he told himself he did it out of love. But love built on lies isn't love. It's a house of cards waiting to collapse. I sat there long after he went to bed, alone in the living room with only dim light and the ticking of a clock. And I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore, but I didn't trust him. And when trust has been shattered to the roots, no amount of apology can make the tree grow back the same. I knew in that moment my decision was made. I left the next morning. No final fight, no tears, no goodbye hug. Just the cold silence of a woman who had decided to let go, not because she stopped loving, but because she could no longer love blindly. I packed my things as the sun rose, left the wedding ring on the kitchen counter, the warmest spot in the house, and walked out the door as if shedding a heavy skin that had bound me for years. I thought he would call. I thought there'd be at least a message. But no, the first to call was his mother. "What are you doing to this family?" she said, as if I was the traitor. I said nothing. She continued, "She thinks of you as her real mother. You know that. My son just wanted her to have a home, a mother, and you're just going to leave? Over a mistake from the past?" I gave a bitter smile. A mistake from the past, as if lying to me for 10 years was a minor slip, as if the deepest betrayal was just a stumble. The calls from his relatives that followed weren't any better. Some said I was too cold-hearted. Some said I had lived with her for so long. What difference did it make now? Just accept it. Don't ruin what you have. One even said, he did it out of love. You have to understand that. I do. I understand better than anyone. And that's exactly why I couldn't stay. I didn't leave because I hated the girl. On the contrary, I loved her. Loved her because she didn't get to live with her real mother. Loved her because she was pulled into a role from childhood. But I couldn't continue to be her mother when the entire relationship was built on a lie. I didn't leave because my husband had a child before we met. Everyone has a past. I left because he chose to bury that past and turn me into a puppet in the story he wrote. I left because I deserved a real life, one where I knew the truth from the start, where I could choose my role, not have it handed to me through manipulation and fear of loss. Maybe I'm heartless in their eyes. Maybe I'm the one who tore a family apart. But for the first time in years, I got to choose my own path. And this time, I chose myself.